to Melissa, Matt, Devon, and Toni.
Oh, still muted. Thanks so much, AJ. All right, just give me 1 second to pull our slides up. In the meantime, hopefully you did see it on the background. If you do not have a Wikipedia account already, we encourage you to take a couple of minutes to do so. Toni has put that tiny URL in the chat. And so please feel free to do that at your earliest convenience. All right, just give me 1 minute to get our slides up. Apologies, just having a technical difficulty here. Okay, I think we are ready. So hello and thank you for attending our session, Open Access Outreach through Black Lives Matter Edit-a-thons, Building a Wikipedia Community of Practice. My name is Melissa Seelye, and I am joined by my colleagues, Matt Martin, Devon Rodrigues, and Toni Panlilio. We comprise the Digital Scholarship Center team at San Francisco State University's J. Paul Leonard Library, and we are excited to share some takeaways from our experience hosting Wikipedia edit-a-thons over the past year. We have approached these events as a means of demonstrating the real-world implications of unhindered access to information, which then helps contextualize conversations about paywalled versus open access sources, as well as information privilege more broadly. For today's session, as AJ indicated, we will start off with a 10-minute presentation to help familiarize you with how we've framed our Black Lives Matter edit-a-thons, as well as in more logistical considerations. From there, we will provide a live demo of how to add a citation to Wikipedia, followed by a 5-minute question and answer period. You will then all have an opportunity to practice editing Wikipedia, and we will conclude with another question and answer period. Please feel free to post questions in the Q&A box throughout the session, and we will get to them as time allows. Now I'm going to turn it over to Devon to get us started on the presentation.
Thank you, Melissa. Hello, everyone. My name is Devon Rodrigues. We started hosting Black Lives Matter edit-a-thons over the summer of 2020, inspired by the Black Lives Matter Wiki project, which aims to improve Wikipedia's coverage of topics related to Black Lives Matter and the African diaspora more broadly. Our edit-a-thons align with our library's commitment to anti-racism. We are also committed to designing programming at JPLL using a racial equity framework that educates and offers a forum for our campus community about systemic racism. We believe that academia as a whole must do more to engage with the Black Lives Matter movement and contribute to real-world solutions to pressing problems, such as the proliferation of biased and false information. As Bell, Barry, Leopold, and Nakoma have written, through students, we have the opportunity to influence countless others through their convictions as they work, manage, and lead in organizations and society around the world. Wikipedia edit-a-thons provide a very effective learning tool to these ends, and we have identified various avenues for getting students involved. One of the reasons that Wikipedia lends itself so well to anti-racist library programming is that bias on the platform has been very well documented. As said by James Hare, past president of Wikimedia DC, the stereotype of a Wikipedia editor is a 30-year-old white man. And so most of the articles are about stuff that interests 30-year-old white men. So a lot of Black history is left out. There's an overrepresentation of young, technically savvy white men on Wikipedia that is creating an information gap in regards to Black American history. Our goal is to help bridge that gap by helping others understand the current levels of bias and guiding new Wikipedians towards areas of information that are lacking. By editing more underrepresented articles, we will create a more equitable base of information on Wikipedia. Now, I'll turn it over to Toni.
Thank you, Devon. Hi, I'm Toni Panlilio, and I will share some information about how we host our edit-a-thons. In the virtual environment, 90 minutes seem to be a good length of time for an edit-a-thon, and we hold them via Zoom. We sometimes develop a more specific area of focus to complement the Black Lives Matter theme, such as our Martin Luther King Jr. edit-a-thon back in January. Typically, we share general information in the main room before using breakout rooms to separate first-time attendees and enable smaller group discussions facilitated by at least 2 co-hosts. Unfortunately, we won't be able to do that today, but hopefully you will still get a sense of our process. We also encourage participants to screen share when questions arise so everyone can learn from one another. This slide shows a timeline of the edit-a-thons we have hosted over the last year. We have gradually built our community of practice, beginning with a One Live, One Rev themed edit-a-thon in May of 2020. That event was open to all faculty and staff in our library and focused on adding citations to Wikipedia articles. From there, we hosted Black Lives Matter themed edit-a-thons throughout the summer of 2020 to develop 2 biographical stub articles. Those sessions were also open to our colleagues in the library. Beginning in October 2020, we opened our edit-a-thons up to instructional faculty at San Francisco State with a Black Lives Matter edit-a-thon in celebration of Open Access Week. We then invited library faculty and staff from other campuses in the California State University system, beginning with our November 2020 edit-a-thon, and we have continued hosting monthly Black Lives Matter edit-a-thons open to all these groups since then. Moving forward, we are planning to opening these sessions to students in the coming months. As I mentioned on the previous slide, we have done some in-depth editing of short Wikipedia articles, known as stubs. But for the majority of our edit-a-thons, we have focused on adding citations to reliable sources. In total, more than 30 faculty and staff have participated in these events, and we have added well over 300 citations to the Wikipedia articles related to the Black Lives Matter movement and the African diaspora more broadly. For the first-time attendees, we try to find Wikipedia articles in need of citations that are relevant to our chosen theme, as well as 1 or 2 potential sources to help expedite the process and ensure participants have enough time to add at least 1 citation. For returning attendees, we have started introducing them to Citation Hunt tool, which they can use to search for articles in need of citations by topic. Now, I will turn it over to Matt, who will talk about today's activity.
Thanks, Toni. This is Matt, and now that you understand how the edit-a-thons work conceptually, I'll go over today's editing activity so you can see how an edit-a-thon will work on a practical level. You have your choice of 2 activities, depending on your comfort level when it comes to reading about potentially upsetting content or your level of experience editing Wikipedia. You can either add 1 or more citations to any of our suggested Wikipedia articles in need of citations, or you can add citations to Wikipedia articles of your choice using the Citation Hunt tool. Before we get to that demo, I have a few tips that will help make Wikipedia a better place. The first tip is to use open access sources whenever possible. As you can see, Wikipedia links to too many paywalled sources, which means that curious people who stumble across a Wikipedia page who are unaffiliated with a university will be unable to verify information for themselves or do any further reading. Using Google Scholar, the directory of open access journals, the directory of open access books, and other tools will help you locate open access sources to share with the world. Since writing from a neutral point of view is one of Wikipedia's fundamental principles, along with verifiability and no original research, you should also consider the viewpoint of potential sources and seek to find reliable sources that represent issues fairly as well. Now we'll pause for a 5-minute question period before Melissa demonstrates how to add a citation in Wikipedia.
So I'm going to be doing a demo now. Just give me 1 second to move over there. Okay. So we'll be sharing this link with you momentarily, but I just want to sort of give you a lay of this Google Doc because there's a lot in here to get us started. So we generally have these Google Docs, at least one for every edit-a-thon that we host. If we are making use of breakout rooms, each breakout room will have its own Google Doc, which will be shared with all participants. As Matt mentioned, we have a playlist. We sometimes play that for participants, especially if we have returning people that are comfortable editing and it's just good background music. If we have a lot of beginners, we generally don't play that because we want everyone to feel comfortable raising questions and having discussion. Also, as Matt said, we have 2 activities for you today, and I'm going to be demoing the first one, which is adding citations to Wikipedia articles that we have already identified as needing citations. If you are already comfortable with Wikipedia or would like to try adding citations to articles of your choice, you can use the citation hunt tool. In the interest of time, I won't be demoing that today, but in the Google Doc, there are written instructions as well as an accompanying video to help you figure out how to use that if you are new to that tool. So we have instructions for both activities. Like I said, I'm going to be focusing on the first one for this demo. I do want to note 2 things at the start. So first, we have found, like I said, a variety of Wikipedia articles in need of citations and grouped those into 2 broad categories. The first being systemic racism, policing, and alternatives to policing. And the second, African-American educators, activists, and creators. We want to note just at the front end of this that especially in the case of articles associated with that first category, doing research to fill those citation needs could result in you coming across upsetting depictions of violence. So, please note that up front. If you would like to edit alternative articles, we have that other category, or you can use the citation hunt tool. So to facilitate editing, this is actually the first time that we've used a Google Sheet. We, in the past, have used a Google Doc for this purpose, but the Google Doc was getting a little overwhelming given the number of attendees that we were anticipating today. So we've moved to a Google Sheet, and I think that we'll probably stick with this format. And what you see here is obviously in column A, this is where you will claim an article that you want to work on. You can just say yes. If you would like to include your name, you're welcome to, but certainly not required to do so. In column B, you will be able to track the number of citations that you add when you're finished editing. And so that helps us to kind of celebrate our collective contributions at the end. Toni has been taking the lead on our social media promotion, so often does a post after our edit-a-thons to celebrate how many citations we added. So that's what column B is for. Column C links out to the Wikipedia articles, and column D has usually one associated snippet, to use the language of the citation hunt tool, that requires a citation. And we know that it requires a citation because it has a citation needed tag after that snippet or sentence. And then in column E, we have, in some cases, some potential sources that we have already found. We do that additional work, especially for beginner Wikipedians, because we want them to get the experience of adding a citation within that 90-minute window. And because we also do a presentation, there's not a lot of time. So for those who are very new to the platform, we encourage them to choose an article for which we already have a potential source, and then they can get started right away in adding that. Further down in the list, we have some that do not have potential sources. And if you were to choose one of those, you will be responsible for doing the research and finding reliable sources on your own. Okay, so that's an overview of this Google Sheet. As you can see, the first tab is the systemic racism, policing, and alternatives category. You can click on the second tab to see the African-American educators, activists, and creators articles. And I'm just going to quickly demo how to add a citation for this first article, police misconduct. So I'm going to click on that link. That should take me directly to the Wikipedia article. I'm going to want to make sure that I am logged in. I can see that I am. My username appears up here in the toolbar. If I were not, you can just click the this would say login in the upper right corner, and then you can log in. If you don't yet have a Wikipedia account, we have a link again to those instructions in the Google Doc, which we will be sharing shortly. The next step is going to be to find that snippet. And so you can just skim through the article, or you can do a Control F, a Command F search for part of the snippet, which is what I'm going to do. And here is my sentence. So you're always going to want to read that sentence, or in some cases, even the surrounding sentences, to get some context in terms of what type of source you will need. So in this case, this sentence is about the importance of citizen journalism, video evidence in terms of raising public awareness about police misconduct. And the sentence then mentions specific cases. And so in this case, we have already identified some potential sources. I'm not going to go through all of those, but I do just want to note the differences here in terms of helping you to see how this activity can be really useful for teaching people about open access. So the first is a Paywalled book. We have the link to the Google Books version, which does not have a preview. And so we were able to figure out a particular page number that would work as a source for this snippet, but it's not that valuable because readers can't actually see it unless they own the book or otherwise have access to it. The next source here is a Paywalled journal article, which is actually very relevant to this snippet. It would be a great source to add, but again, it's paywalled. And so many users will not be able to read it without an institutional affiliation, or if they are willing to obviously pay the fee to remove that paywall. And then we have some openly accessible news articles and a thesis. So theses and dissertations can actually be a great way to include scholarly content on Wikipedia that is in fact open access. Just in the interest of time, I'm going to demonstrate how I would go about adding this news article. So I'm going to grab that URL and go back to the police misconduct article. If you have a citation needed tag already, you would just click that tag. Oh, I missed a step, sorry. First, I have to click the edit button. So you have to scroll up to the top of your article and click edit. Hopefully, when you do that, it will look like it does on my screen. If it does not, there should be an icon in this corner where you can switch the editor. You may end up on source editing initially. If you are not comfortable with that, and most new editors are not, you can switch to the visual editor, which should be represented by that pencil icon. So now I need to jump back down to my snippet. So it was video evidence. Now, if I click that citation needed tag and click add a citation, it will open up this form. There's a manual and automatic method. We always recommend starting with the automatic method because it's shorter. With this method, you just copy and paste a URL and then click the generate button and hope for the best. Sometimes this works better than others. With scholarly sources, if there is a DOI, you should always use that. So again, you can teach students in particular a lot of different tips and tricks when it comes to these edit-a-thons and talk about things like DOIs. Okay, so this says that it was unable to make a manual citation for, or an automatic citation for me. So in that case, I will need to go the manual route. This is a news story. There are not that many categories here. We often recommend just using the website form for online resources that don't fit the book, news, or journal template. So in this case, I will use the news one. I'm going to put the URL in there, and then I need to grab all of this other information. So I am seeing, okay, I'm not seeing an author. It is coming from the CBC though, and so I'm going to put that there. when it comes to the source date, it's often helpful to look at other citations. Wikipedia allows various citation styles, but the community prefers consistency within a particular article. I took a look at this one in advance, and it is using date, month, year spelled out. And so I will do that. That would be 28 October 2009. And then I put CVC in the wrong place. CVC should be in name of publication. Then I will grab the source title. And so in the interest of time, I'm just going to insert this one. I will also add today's date. And then click insert. Okay, so it wants me to revise that date. In some cases, you will get a red notification, so that's good to keep an eye out for. Let's try this again. There we go. So that put it in correctly for me. In most cases, it's going to automatically remove that citation needed tag when you do it this way, but not always. So you want to be sure that that is removed once you've added one. If it does not remove it automatically, I can select it and then just use my delete or backspace key to remove it. I'm going to go back in and edit this some more and add another source to it, but let's assume that I'm done. Once you add that, I'm going to click the Publish Changes button and just briefly describe what I did. So often I will just write, added a citation to the mobile devices section. This is not a minor edit because I am adding a citation. Minor edits are usually typographical corrections, things of that nature. If you're very interested in this topic, you can check the watch this page box and then you will get updates about future edits. But other than that, the last thing to do is click Publish Changes. I get a confirmation message saying my edit was published. And my edit will now appear on the history page for this article, as well as on my user contributions list. So that was obviously a rapid demo. I'm sure that more questions will come up. I do just want to note one other point. So once you go into this edit menu, let's say a couple of things could happen. Let's say that you wanted to add another citation to that same one, that same place, and now my citation needed tag is gone. It's easy to just put your cursor where you would like that citation to appear and click the Cite button. You're going to get the same options then, the automatic manual method. You can also reuse an existing citation. You can click that and then just type in a keyword to pull that citation up. So I can pull up the source that I just added to that CBC article, for example, to reuse it. Another thing to note is that you can edit the text. So let's say that you came across an instance of plagiarism or an error in the text that is already in the Wikipedia article. You can, once you're in visual editor mode, edit this text quite easily, just as you would in any word processing program, just by placing your cursor wherever the change is needed and then typing changes. I'm not going to save these, but just showing you for demonstrative purposes. Okay, again, I'm sure questions will come up. We're happy to respond if there are troubleshooting questions in the chat. Normally we would handle those in breakout rooms, but if you do have questions, please don't hesitate to let us know. And with that, we'll get started. Toni is going to share the link to the Google Doc in the chat. And I will continue screen sharing these instructions. And we'll be here. We'll keep an eye on questions and we will come back at, what time is it? 3:35, right? For closing Q&A. Happy editing, everyone. Please do let us know if you run into any issues or have questions. First, we have a recommended reading if you're interested, and Toni will put the link to this article in the chat. It's an article from over the summer from Slate, and it just does a nice job contextualizing Wikipedia in relation to the Black Lives Matter movement and the events of last summer, especially around the killing of George Floyd. So we recommend that reading if you're interested. And then secondly, if you would like to see how we hold one of these edit-a-thons for the full 90 minutes, you are welcome to attend our upcoming edit-a-thon on May 21st, which will be, it marks 1 year since we started these edit-a-thons, and it will be in celebration of the global Live, One Ref, One Librarian, One Reference campaign. And Toni will also put the registration link to that event in chat. And with that, we'd like to have time for questions if you have them.
That was such